And now on to our first panel. We'll be having our first panel moderated by Ms. Pierre, a Director General at CIPO. He's the Director General of Trademarks and the Industrial Designs Branch. This discussion will be on the importance of IP, or owning your ideas, as a valuable business asset for Black entrepreneurs. Ms. May, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Bon après-midi tout le monde. With me today are distinguished guests and panelists. To my right, immediate, Dr. Daniel, Dr. Pierre, and then Mr. Lindor, who almost gave me a heart attack by joining. So thanks again for making the trip here and joining us. I'm not going to go through your bio, but I'll start with the first question that maybe you can help us get through this. Can you provide an overview of your career, as well as highlighting key moments or decisions that propel you in the leadership position you hold today? Maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Daniel. Thank you.
So I love French, but I'm not as fluent as I would like to be. So I'm just going to say bonjour. So I would say my journey to where I am today began on the small island of Barbados, where I grew up. And unfortunately, in the last year of my undergraduate degree at Queen's University, my next door neighbor died of breast cancer. And a month later, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And then my mom succumbed to ovarian cancer 4 days before I convocated from Queen's. At that point, I was considering medical school, but at 22 years old, I realized the physicians were unable to help either my mom or my aunt because we just did not have enough novel drug therapies definitely not for ovarian cancer. And so I decided to pursue a career in cancer research, and that led me to UBC after Queen's, which I heard at the time was the warmest place in Canada. And I was fed up with snow in Kingston. And to be totally honest, that's how I ended up there. And then from there, I went to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital because I wanted to do more research using human and tissue samples. And that's where I began this journey that led to my discovery of the gene Kaizo, which plays a role in cell adhesion and tumor metastasis, because it was in that lab at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis that I cloned the gene as I was trying to understand what causes tumor cells to break away from the primary tumor, whether it's a tumor in the breast or the pancreas or the prostate, what caused those cells to break away and not stay in the tumor. And it was there that I cloned and identified Kaizo, and then I got the faculty position at McMaster, and I've been at McMaster for 24 years, trying to understand the role of Kaizo in all cancers. And yeah, that's how I got to where I am today in a very short couple of minutes.
Thank you very much for this. I'm going to turn to Dr. Pierre, and for full disclosure, he's known me for many years. I think I was early teen family friends of my brother as well. So Dr. Pierre, maybe highlighting some of the key period of your career and decision for where you are. And
okay, good evening, everybody. I will speak in French because I'm coming from Quebec. D'abord, je remercie les organisateurs, organisatrices de cet événement qui nous donnent l'opportunité de découvrir la grande richesse de la communauté noire au Canada. Je vous dirai d'entrée de jeu que je ne fais pas de distinction entre les couleurs des personnes. En général, les couleurs des personnes ne m'intéressent pas. Ce qui m'intéresse dans les personnes, c'est deux choses. C'est leur esprit et leur cœur. Et ces deux choses-là n'ont pas de couleur. C'est comme l'intelligence. Donc l'intelligence, c'est la chose la mieux partagée au monde et tout le monde en a, indépendamment de ta couleur. Alors cela, une fois dit, eh bien, je suis tout aussi confortable de travailler avec des personnes, qu'elles soient jaunes, vertes, rouges, blancs ou n'importe quoi, pourvu que vous ayez les deux atouts que sont l'esprit et le cœur. Je suis venu au Canada en 1979 et c'était pour entamer mes études en ingénierie à Polytechnique Montréal. Et après avoir complété mon diplôme d'ingénieur civil à Polytechnique, je suis allé à l'UQAM, l'Université du Québec à Montréal, faire un deuxième baccalauréat en mathématiques informatiques. Et immédiatement après, en enchaînant, une maîtrise en mathématiques informatiques, toujours à l'UQAM. Et par la suite, je suis retourné à Polytechnique, non plus en génie civil, mais en génie électrique, pour faire mon doctorat en génie électrique. Mais c'était une façon pour moi de faire les réseaux informatiques. Et en parallèle, avec mes études doctorales, donc j'ai complété une maîtrise en sciences économiques à l'Université de Montréal. Par la suite, en fait, même pendant mon doctorat, je suis devenu professeur. J'ai débuté ma carrière de professeur à l'Université du Québec à Trois-Rivières, l'UQTR, et je suis resté 1 an. Et moins d'1 an après mon entrée, j'ai trouvé un poste à la Téléuniversité pour revenir à Montréal. Et je suis resté 10 ans à la Téléuniversité. Et par la suite, j'ai été à Polytechnique au département de génie informatique et génie logiciel où je suis professeur titulaire aujourd'hui. Donc, ça fait déjà 24 ans. Entre-temps, j'étais titulaire d'une chaire de recherche en réseautique mobile avec la multinationale Ericsson. Donc, cela a duré 12 ans. Donc, cette compagnie finançait à 50% les recherches et l'autre 50% était financé par le Conseil de recherche en sciences naturelles et en génie du Canada. Et depuis, disons, les 6 dernières années, donc je fais, disons, de la recherche avec des entreprises privées qui subventionnent mes recherches. Et pour devenir la personne que je suis, évidemment, on ne devient pas comme ça tout seul. Donc, on est accompagné par des personnes qui sont peut-être des directeurs de département, des administrateurs, des collègues qui participent à vos travaux, des étudiants aussi qui nous stimulent. C'est pas seulement nous qui les stimulons, ils nous stimulent aussi. Et à peu près, à chaque 10 ans, j'investis un nouveau domaine. Donc, quand j'atteins le sommet dans le nouveau domaine, je change. Et ça, c'est mon esprit innovateur. Dès l'instant où je maîtrise trop bien la chose, il n'y a plus de défi pour moi, donc je change de domaine. Donc, les 10 premières années, j'ai travaillé en intelligence artificielle à un moment où on n'en parlait pas. Ma thèse de doctorat s'intitule « Approche d'intelligence artificielle pour la conception de réseaux téléinformatiques de grande taille ». Donc, je faisais déjà depuis le fin des années 80, début des années 90. Par la suite, je suis devenu un expert mondial dans le domaine de la gestion de mobilité. Comme l'a dit notre chère sénatrice, quand vous composez le numéro de quelqu'un qui est sur un cellulaire pour rejoindre cette personne-là, bien, ce sont mes algorithmes qui permettent de trouver la personne là où elle se trouve sur la planète. Et je me garde de vous dire qu'est-ce que j'ai fait pour vous trouver. Et j'en sais tellement que je ne porte pas de téléphone cellulaire sur moi. Et depuis quelques années, disons les 5 dernières années, et je travaille beaucoup, j'investis un nouveau champ qui est la cybersécurité, où je fais, d'ailleurs je reviens, et la semaine dernière, j'ai été à un sommet des pays du Golfe et de l'Afrique qui essayait de mettre en place un protocole de collaboration en matière de cybersécurité internationale. Donc tout ça pour dire que être un leader, c'est le résultat du travail assidu, mais de travail qui ne se fait pas seul. Et parler de la propriété intellectuelle, on y reviendra, je suis plutôt de la propriété intellectuelle collective. Je ne fais pas seul, d'ailleurs ma fonction me l'interdit, je n'ai pas le droit, comme professeur d'université, de faire de la recherche seul. Je dois faire de la recherche formative. Je dois impliquer les étudiants pour les entraîner, pour les former, pour former la relève. Donc j'aurais pu dire, j'ai la compétence qu'il faut, je n'ai pas besoin d'étudiants, ils vont me faire perdre mon temps. Mon statut de prof d'université me l'interdit. Donc, je dois faire de la recherche formative avec des étudiants. Et mes résultats qui donnent lieu à de la propriété intellectuelle, c'est de la propriété intellectuelle partagée. Donc, on aura l'occasion d'y revenir. Merci.
Merci à vous. Maybe to you now, Mr. Lindor, if you could give us a brushstroke of the key highlights of your career journey and some of the decisions that propel you to that extraordinary leadership position you're called.
Thank you. I love how you said maybe to you. Following this, it's going to be hard to beat. Mon nom c'est Thierry Lindor. Mon père est haïtien. Ma mère est française. Ça fait de moi un Marocain en fait. En attendant, toute blague à part, je suis haïtien, je suis né fièrement haïtien et je mourrai haïtien. Et je prends le temps de le dire parce que je crois que c'est important. Haïtien pour moi, ça veut dire beaucoup. I'm going to switch to English. I'm blessed, black, highly favored to be in front of everybody here, especially with people that I have tremendous respect for. I'm an entrepreneur, active citizen. I co-founded FACE, the Federation of African Canadian Economics. Today, we're going to touch on intellectual property. I love that Black intellectual property was poured into the Black entrepreneurship program, which was able to mobilize over $300 million to help scale and start Black businesses. I'm also a G20 delegate. I represented Canada on the global stage in Japan, Fukuoka, as well as Saudi Arabia. I also am a UN delegate. And more recently, I started a company in AI, artificial intelligence, called Haply.ai. What we focus on is democratizing access to funding. Essentially, what our platform does is it matches entrepreneurs with funding opportunities based on their unique profile. So you want to picture kind of like a Tinder, but instead of matching you with potential stalkers, it matches you with potential dollars. Okay, but the matching is not where the magic happens, right? I see people laughing. I'm like, oh, a lot of people know Tinder here. The matching is not where the magic happens. The magic happens when we like to tell people we help them FAQ, find, apply, and qualify for funding. So the magic happens when we use NLP, natural language processing, and we auto-populate up to 90% of their application process. And then following this, we created a pretty cool tool that we're proud of, an anticipatory texting tool, kind of like Grammarly, but instead of correcting for grammar mistakes, it corrects for grant writing, procurement, shred mistakes that could be fatal flaws that would get you denied. In 2 years of existing, we've won BMO Award, Amex Award, TELUS Award, NextAI, we finished #1, over 467 companies. And what this has taught me is that Black IP is great IP, and it's worth defending, it's worth fighting for, it's worth promoting, and more importantly, when we're given a chance to compete, we compete well. We just got to get the chance to compete. So we are the living proof of this, and in 2 years, we've helped successfully land thanks to our AI tools, $52.7 million, of which 80% of this is in the hands of BIPOC entrepreneurs, mainly women. And we believe we don't solve, climate change or cure cancer at Haply, but we'll fund and help fund the change makers that have the ideas that are going to change our society. So that's me in a nutshell. It was tough to follow Dr. Pierre, but I did my best.
You did excellent. Mr. Linda also told me the other day he's going to be a bit of a thought provoker, and I'm hoping. I said, no, please share with us. I'm not going to hold you. just flow freely with us. Dr. Pierre, you started to highlight some of your contribution to Canadian society. I would want to hear a little bit more as well on that, and maybe also Dr. Daniel, if you could expand on the impact of your discovery and innovation for us. You, please, yeah.
So, as I said, I cloned and discovered CAISO in, well, I guess the first paper we published on it was 1999, but I actually discovered it in 1995, 96, but we moved the lab from St. Jude Children's Hospital to Vanderbilt. I was the only one that moved with my supervisor, so lost a full year of momentum as a result. But that took forever to get it to publication as a result of that. And so since I was at McMaster, I was characterizing it because it was literally a brand new gene. No one had identified it before. No one knew what it did. So my first 8 years at McMaster were spent characterizing it, trying to understand what does it do in a normal cell? What is its normal functions in a cell? And the entire time at the back of my mind was like, this is not what I wanted. My teenage dream was to find a cure to heal any disease in the world and have global impact. And, so that was kind of like this nagging thing at the back of my mind. And in 2008, I went to a conference in the US, the American Association for Cancer Research. And it was there that I heard a breast oncologist talk about a breast cancer subtype that she was seeing very frequently whenever she went to Ghana, West Africa, to teach the physicians there and the surgeons how to do breast conserving surgery for breast cancer patients in West Africa. And I quickly went back to my hotel room and Googled triple negative breast cancer and saw that there was this incredibly high incidence in young Black women as well as young Black Hispanic women. But no one knew the genetic or molecular cause for this. And the theory at the time was that it was simply socioeconomic factors, because most of the research was being done in the US, but it was all from a socioeconomic status perspective, because they were looking at Black women in the US, where this was a major contributing factor to most of their healthcare issues. But that was explaining the mortality, but it wasn't explaining why they were getting such a high incidence in the first place. So my next research lead was in 2011, being from Barbados, and Kaizo, by the way, is named after my favorite music, Calypso. And regarding IP, so I just want to put this in here. So it's really interesting because I discovered it, I named it, my supervisor gave me permission because he regretted naming the gene he discovered 4 years before me, just based on its molecular weight. It weighed 120 kilodaltons, and he literally called it P120. And he regretted that. Unfortunately, he died suddenly a year and a half ago, and he regretted that. So when I discovered this, he said, just name it something. You have my permission. Just don't be obnoxious or rude. And so, having gone to many conferences as well by that point, and hardly seeing any Black scientists when I went to cancer research conferences, I wanted to name it something that was uniquely Caribbean or from the African diaspora. And since I love Calypso music, I thought I'll name it something. Calypso would have been too obvious a name. So I wanted something a little bit more subtle. So I thought Kaiso, that's the correct pronunciation, but most people, maybe other than the Haitians, can say Kaiso. And so I just say Kaiso in these contexts. And so as I said, I've been studying this, and just a little segue, about 8 years ago, I went to a conference and I was speaking about it. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, "You discovered it? Person ABCD has been talking about this and they're doing research on it, and we all thought they discovered it." And yeah, so, but you can't patent the name of gene or anything, right? So, but it was just really interesting that this person never acknowledged that I was the one that had discovered it whenever they gave a talk. So anyway, so after hearing Dr. Lisa Newman, I went to Barbados in 2011 and to just basically see if I could start some studies there to see whether Black women in Barbados and the Caribbean also had a high incidence of triple negative breast cancer. My friend, as well as a mentor at the time, Dr. David Rim, was a physician scientist at Yale University, and he had pioneered a technique called tissue microarrays, where you take small pieces of tumor tissues from any tumor and you put them all on one small block rather than screening hundreds on these larger blocks, which would take forever. And he had pioneered that technique. So I reached out to him and said, "Hey, do you think I can do this? Would you partner with me on a grant?" And it was one of those, what they call it, Henry Ford, what's the other guy? Henry Ford and I'm blanking. Yeah, it was oh gosh, I can't believe I'm freezing. Anyway, basically, he validated that my idea was a great idea, because until then, others were telling me not so good an idea. But Dave said, yes, great idea. No one in the US has collected a series of tissues from Black women with breast cancer. And so this would be something completely new, innovative, and we would learn a lot more about breast cancer. We didn't get funded. We did try twice. And after our second failure, even though we got ranking, we were scored like 9.3 out of 10. And typically those grants were funded. So we would get to the last round where they have to decide who to fund, and they wouldn't fund us. And this is, again, for any younger people listening, he was a great friend and mentor, but he was white. And he said, maybe they're not funding us because you're Black, you're in Canada, and this is a study focused on Black women. But I'm the PI, like I listed him as the PI, thinking because he was more senior, he was American, he was at Yale versus my master. I thought they would have looked more favorably on our application, but he thought, well, maybe they're not because he's white. So then he said, I'm going to step off, you become the PI and apply to Canadian funding agencies. So he became a collaborator rather than co-PI with me. And unfortunately, our Canadian research ecosystem did not see the value in this research. The first time I tried, one reviewer said it was not relevant to the Canadian context. And so to all the Black women and Black people in this room, so that was incredibly disheartening as a Black woman. And at the time I was also I am a breast cancer survivor. And so for me, it was incredibly disheartening for a reviewer to say, studying a really aggressive breast cancer in Black women in a Canadian lab was not relevant. I'm very persistent, so I tried 2 more times. And the third time I was ranked number 2 on the panel and I was funded. So also never give up when you believe in something that you know. So yeah. So I would say, so that was how I kind of got to where I am now, as I said, because literally when I started this in 2011 and we wrote grants, basically I wasn't funded till 2015. And now there are labs in the US that are starting to make tissue microarrays from Black women and Black men for prostate cancer in the US. And a few labs in Canada trying to imitate us, but they can't. So we have the most unique resource right now of triple negative breast cancer tumors from Black women in Nigeria, Barbados, Jamaica, and we're about to expand to Trinidad and hopefully to Senegal. And so it's a very unique resource that we have in my lab at McMaster that no one else has in Canada. Yep. And Face is going to give us some money.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking for.
So I don't have to spend my precious hours writing grants when I could be doing the research.
Absolutely. Thank you for all your work, and thank you for, as we call it, un parcours de combattant that you had to go through to get to these discoveries and the impact you're having on the lives of many.
Thank you.
Let me turn to you, Dr. Pierre. As I have 2 cell phones, you're integral to to the technologies and discovery. Tell us a little about the impact of your contribution, as we can pretty much, entertain on Canadian society.
En fait, le mot impact dans ce que je fais et dans ce que j'ai fait pendant toute ma carrière est d'une grande importance. Avant de faire quoi que ce soit en recherche, même en enseignement, j'ai moins de marge de manœuvre parce que c'est l'université qui me fixe le cadre d'enseignement, qui décide des cours. Mais en matière de recherche, vous avez la liberté. Et le mot impact est important. Pourquoi on fait cela? Qu'est-ce que ça va nous donner? Il y a une manière, je dirais, traditionnelle de mesurer l'impact dans un milieu universitaire, notamment en matière de recherche scientifique. On regarde le nombre de citations que vous avez, les personnes qui citent vos travaux, donc le nombre de citations. Il se donne des index. Il y a l'index H, par exemple, qui sert à mesurer l'impact. Il y a l'indice I10 qui sert aussi. Moi, je considère ça comme étant de faux indices. Le vrai indice d'impact, c'est la quantité et la qualité de personnes que vous avez formées et que sont devenues ces personnes-là pour la société. Et je me rappelle, le plus beau compliment que j'ai eu d'un de mes étudiants, c'était de me dire, je suis venu du Maroc et pour étudier, pour faire ma maîtrise à Polytechnique Montréal, le professeur Pierre m'accueille à son bureau et j'en suis sorti avec un projet de vie. Il a terminé sa maîtrise, il a fait son doctorat et aujourd'hui, il travaille dans une grande firme canadienne à Montréal. Il est content de son parcours. Et il dit, c'est M. Pierre qui m'a éclairé la voie. Et c'est ça que j'appelle l'impact. Ma plus grande joie dans ma carrière, c'est quand un de mes étudiants de maîtrise ou de doctorat vient me dire, je viens de trouver mon premier emploi. Ça, c'est une vraie mesure d'impact. Ça veut dire que vous avez pu former la personne au point que la personne devienne assez convaincante pour convaincre un employeur qui cherche de la qualité à l'embaucher. Donc ça, c'est la vraie mesure de l'impact. Dans ma recherche, comme je vous l'ai dit, à chaque 10 ans, je change de champ. Au début, j'ai commencé en intelligence artificielle, design de réseau informatique et du téléenseignement. Après 10 ans, je me suis mis à faire de la gestion de mobilité, qui est devenu le champ principal de recherche pour lequel je suis connu mondialement. Et là, depuis à peu près 6 ans, j'ai investi le champ de la cybersécurité, cyber-résilience en mettant à contribution ce que j'ai fait dans les 20 années qui ont précédé. Mais toujours avec, disons, le même souci. Comment faire pour marquer la différence? Et comment faire pour faire ce que les autres n'ont pas pu réussir à faire? Alors, en général, quand je vois que le terrain est déjà rempli, je ne m'aventure pas. Je laisse les gens se rentrer en compétition les uns avec les autres. Moi, je vais chercher les sentiers qui ne sont pas battus et je vais m'aventurer dans les sentiers non battus. Ce que ça prend un goût du risque, parce qu'on peut travailler longtemps et ne pas avoir de résultats, mais quand on a fait un certain nombre déjà de choses, on peut se permettre de le faire, de chercher et de ne pas trouver. Mais dans tout ça, il y a quelque chose qui demeure et qui est lié encore à la mesure de l'impact. Le fait de chercher et de montrer à des jeunes chercheurs comment chercher, peu importe le résultat, c'est déjà un résultat. De montrer comment chercher, comment découvrir de nouvelles choses. Et c'est un défi permanent parce que si on ne forme pas ces personnes-là, l'université ne pourra pas fonctionner parce qu'on n'a pas assez de chercheurs, assez de professeurs, la société ne pourra pas fonctionner, on ne connaîtra pas le progrès ni le bien-être. Pensez aux maladies qui n'ont pas de traitement, il faut continuer à faire de la recherche pour pouvoir découvrir les traitements qui vont avec ces maladies. Donc, nous avons un devoir d'aller de l'avant et de former une nouvelle génération en espérant que cette génération va nous dépasser de manière à pouvoir faire face aux problèmes de la société. Les défis, j'en ai rencontrés tout au long. Tout à l'heure, vous avez parlé de vos difficultés pour trouver ma première subvention de recherche au Conseil national de recherche. J'ai dû faire la demande 3 fois pour me faire dire non. Et la 4e fois, ça a marché. Aujourd'hui, quand j'en fais 10, j'en reçois 9.
En effet, avec votre réputation maintenant, c'est plus simple, mais vous avez un goût du risque et une persévérance très élevée.
À toute épreuve, ce qui me caractérise, tu ne me décourageras jamais. Jamais. C'est-à-dire, tu me dis non, j'essaie de comprendre pourquoi, vous me donnez les raisons, je fais une nouvelle version, je vous le soumets, et je compte là-dessus. Parce que finalement, ce qui va arriver, vous allez dire, ce monsieur-là, il ne va pas me lâcher, donc il va falloir que je donne ce qu'il veut.
Soit pas à l'usure, certainement. Monsieur Lindor, nos collègues ici ont eu beaucoup de difficultés avec les innovations pour pouvoir obtenir le financement. Parlez-moi un peu de la contribution de votre invention, vos solutions. Vous m'avez dit un peu le montant, la somme d'argent que vous avez pu appuyer pour trouver. Donc, peut-être vous pouvez explorer davantage.
Oui, près de 54 millions, en fait, over 54 million, close to $54 million. But I think it's important, if we're going to talk about property, to contextualize why it's meaningful to people of African descent in the land we call Canada. If we stop and think about it for 2 seconds, at least for me and most people here, 400 years ago, everybody would have been, that is melanated, would have been considered property in North America. Legit property. You were sold, traded, refinanced, violated, killed, murdered, so on and so forth, lynched. And then from 1600 to 1865, then suddenly you're no longer property, but you're prevented from being able to acquire it. So they put barriers to make sure you don't own any properties. So it's not that you are property, but you are no longer able to acquire it. So you can't create wealth, essentially. And then around the 50s, 1950s, 60s, that is 60 years ago. 60 years ago, you're finally able to acquire wealth, acquire property. So I want us also to recognize and stop and think about this. In the span of 60 years, here we are at the government talking about intellectual property. That's why I say this whenever I speak in the US, in Brazil, in Tokyo, on global stages. Our relationship to ownership as people of African descent is embedded into our historical trauma that we lived. So owning things, starting with our intellectual property, is key. So I want to salute everybody that made this possible today, because I think there needs to be historical context as to why Black IP truly matters. And as I hear Dr. Juliette, Queen talk, and Dr. Pierre, what I'm hearing also is the potential gentrification of Black IP. When somebody goes and talks publicly about, hey, this new Jean and never mentions her name, that is gentrification 101. And there's nothing worse than getting your ideas gentrified. I bet if I ask any professional in the room if a boss of yours or a manager has ever gentrified your ideas, Monsieur Galland just went, oh yeah, right? So we know it is a true thing. So imagine being melanated and navigating a world that is not always made for you. So I wanted to start there when it comes to property, because I think it's important to contextualize things. Now, that is why we decided to democratize funding. Because like I said, we truly believe that people that are disinvested, we are not, I don't like the term marginalized, I think disinvested. I think it was architected that way to a certain extent, to disinvest in our communities, need to leverage artificial intelligence and technology, and researchers and great minds and mentors that could become sponsors to attain any kind of wealth. And real estate has sailed, newsflash, interest rates are crazy. So our 40 acres and a mule for Black Canadians cannot reside in a strategic real estate play. It has to go through intellectual property acquisition. It has to be a concerted effort by finding the leaders and the pioneers in our community and not asking them to be mentors. Be sponsors. Mentors show you the door, sponsors walk you through it. And for our colleagues that are non-melanated or not, I think there's two types of people on this planet, Africans and displaced Africans. But that is my personal opinion. I think it's also your duty to not just be an ally. I hate that term. You have to be an accomplice. Allies post black squares during, lynchings, and they repost stuff 4 years ago and then they disappear. They get their privilege right back. We need you 24/7 to be on the forefront of making sure that we get justice, because we associate the opposite of poverty as being wealth. How many of you believe that the opposite of poverty is wealth? Raise your hand. Nobody? Nobody believes that the opposite of poverty, right? What if I told you that, in my humble opinion, the opposite of poverty is actually justice? You give us justice, as Black Canadians, we'll get wealth ourselves. Wealth is a byproduct of getting justice. It is not a byproduct or the opposite of. So that is why we created the tool. We want to create a tool where leveraging AI and artificial intelligence technology provides economic justice so that you don't have to give us jobs, we could create them for ourselves. And a strong Black Canadian economy is a strong Canadian economy, point blank, period. So that's why we created our platform.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. That well said, and a lot of dimension, economic, but social as well, which is highly important. Just touching base to some of the terms and elements that you've indicated, I will want to hear from you, Dr. Daniel. You are a woman, Black woman. What are some of the systemic barriers and stereotypes that you face? You started to talk a little bit about this. As an entrepreneur and an innovator, to ensure that your contribution or those who are coming following you are recognized and valued within the marketplace and society?
Oh boy. Okay. First of all, there's way too many to talk about, so you'll have to wait till my memoirs are published, hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years. I have started writing them because there's just too many. There's just a lot of barriers. And I would say the first one began actually when I moved to Memphis to work at St. Jude Children's Hospital. For the first 10 days, I couldn't even open a bank account or get a driver's license or get a social security number. And it was this very circular argument. Well, you need a check, avoid check to get your driver's license, or you need your driver's license to get your social security number. And I just couldn't break the cycle till I went back to my supervisor and said, I may have to go back to Canada because I can't break this cycle. And so he went with me to the bank, and they said, oh, you're working at St. Jude? And their whole demeanor changed because everyone's heard of St. Jude. Everyone knows how awesome they are. And they're like, why didn't you tell us that? And I'm like, why does it matter where I work? I came with a check to deposit, to open a bank account. And so it was Memphis in the 1990s. And it literally, that was my epiphany moment of racism in America and what it means to be Black. Not necessarily a Black woman, but just Black. And then most of my racism I encountered in Memphis, unfortunately. But then I would say when I became a professor at McMaster as well, I was shocked because growing up in poverty in Barbados and thinking and being told, you just get an education, it's your way out of poverty. And I bought into that. I thought everyone that was educated was smart and liberal minded, not necessarily liberal party, just making sure I clarify that here, but liberal minded. And, I was genuinely shocked when I became a professor, and my first year or two, first of all, I walked in for the interview at McMaster and everyone's mouth literally dropped because my name is very Anglophile. And back then, thankfully, we had no Google or internet, so no one knew what I looked like. My CV was incredibly strong, and they clearly expected a white woman to walk in the door, and in walked this Black woman, and everyone went literally like this. And then some of them were confident enough later to say we were not expecting a Black woman to walk through that door. And I think in less than 36 hours, they called and offered me the job, but from the day I started, people would make comments like, oh, you got that because you're a Black woman. And I'm like, they didn't even know I was Black till I showed up. Like, right. And so they would make comments like that if I got an award. And so it's been constantly trying to prove myself, that mantra, we were having this discussion earlier, having to work twice as hard to be considered half as good. And depending on who I'm talking to, I say, so therefore I'm 4 times better than you. So, it's literally been a challenge for me, again, because I genuinely thought that educated people and professors would not be discriminatory or racist. I really believed that until I became a professor. And my mentor, who was the first Black professor at McMaster in 1967, and is still heavily entrenched at McMaster, God bless him, he's amazing. I immediately reached out to him and he said, yes, you will encounter the most racism now that you're a professor, because now people perceive you as being in a position of power and with the ability to make change. And you will now encounter the most racism ever because they will want to keep you down. And that's exactly what happened. And for 21 years, I was the only Black female scientist at the university out of 900 professors. And I was so busy doing my work, I didn't even notice. Until someone pointed it out and they're like, so who else is a Black female? I'm like, oh, I guess it's me. Like, I literally hadn't thought about it because I was so busy just working and training students, as you said, exactly as you said, like for me, those impact factors are incredibly man-made, whatever you want to call it. And because I believe in doing research that impacts society, that's always been my passion and my purpose. But unfortunately, I think academia has been built on these false systems of the more you publish, the more grants you get, the better you are. And, and some people are doing research across the world that has very little impact on anyone. Their articles will never be read by anyone, but they're considered to be these incredible icons. And I'm like, but why? Right? And there are others doing significant research who are never acknowledged, who struggle to get funding, especially when you're in academia. We have to struggle to get funding. And I'm like you, I keep sending the grants back in and they're like, God, she won't give up, and I won't. So I think there are lots of systemic barriers, not necessarily, I think, because I'm Black, but just they're barriers. And it's not made for, as you said, melanated people, or I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I just think that in academia, historically, academia was clearly established from a competitive perspective. It was not established to be collaborative and to solve the world's problems. And I'm happy to see that at least our tri-council agencies are really pushing the agenda now that we need all of our academic researchers to collaborate. And many of our colleagues who used to get those high impact factors and accolades are pushing back because they've never had to collaborate before. And so those of us that believe in actually doing things to help society and want to collaborate are rejoicing at that new move in our Canadian system, but others prefer the old system of just, I am awesome and the rest of you are not awesome. Whereas we believe in we're all awesome, and if we work together, we can elevate Canada. So, yeah.
If I may come back to you, Dr. Pierre, I want to hear about your experience. How crucial understanding intellectual property has been for you, and as an innovator and entrepreneur, you do mention that now you're more successful with respect to the funding component. You've done some very marquee elements. How important is IP and for us to protect it? As Mr. Nader said, you know, like it's a valuable asset to build wealth and so on. So.
Comme chercheur, je suis à la fois chercheur, entrepreneur, innovateur. Ce qui m'a toujours intéressé, et je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, c'est comment former les personnes. Comment former les personnes pour la société. Et cet impératif-là, pour moi, prime la propriété intellectuelle. Et je vais vous donner un exemple. Dans mon laboratoire, il y a à peu près 25 étudiants, master, PhD, postdoc. Nous faisons des séminaires hebdomadaires où tout le monde échange. C'est un lieu d'échange intellectuel et scientifique. Quand on échange, on émet des idées, on émet des commentaires. Ces commentaires-là, les personnes qui les reçoivent les utilisent dans leur mémoire, dans leur thèse, dans les publications qu'ils vont faire. Donc, c'est de la génération collaborative de propriété intellectuelle. Et une chose qui m'exaspère, c'est quand je tombe sur un étudiant qui veut gérer très jalousement sa propriété intellectuelle. Il dit, ah oui, il veut prendre mes idées. Il dit, mais si on est dans une conversation, on émet des idées, à qui appartiennent les idées? Pourquoi vous voulez mettre une cloison pour dire ça, ce sont mes idées? Parce qu'en général, dans un milieu intellectuel, les idées se fertilisent les unes les autres. Vous en mettez une idée, l'autre la reprend, la bonifie, et finalement, ce qui en sort, ce n'est le produit de personne, c'est le produit d'une collaboration subtile, mais d'une vraie collaboration. Donc, la propriété intellectuelle, pour moi, ça arrive en bout de piste. Quand vient le moment de déposer le travail, donc c'est le travail de l'étudiant qu'il avait initié, j'y ai participé, peut-être même d'autres personnes, et on dit à l'étudiant, vous allez ramasser tout ça et mettre ça dans votre thèse. Et là, ça devient la propriété intellectuelle de l'étudiant en question. Mais à la base, ce travail-là a été nourri par beaucoup d'autres personnes. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle je gère de manière très large la propriété intellectuelle. Maintenant, il y a des exigences des organismes subventionnaires. Moi, je suis subventionné par le Conseil de recherche en sciences naturelles et en génie. Je fais beaucoup de collaborations avec l'entreprise privée. La première chose que demande le CRSNG, comme on l'appelle, c'est de signer une entente de propriété intellectuelle, a priori, qui dit que tout ce qui va sortir comme extrait, comme idée, comme innovation, comme brevet, et de cette recherche-là, voilà comment on va le partager. Et de manière générale, il y a bien sûr les étudiants qui participent. Ensuite, il y a le professeur qui encadre. Ensuite, il y a l'entreprise privée qui injecte de l'argent. Et il y a l'université qui donne, en quelque sorte, le cadre général de fonctionnement. Donc ça, ce sont les 4 partenaires qui partagent la propriété intellectuelle. Mais il y a 2 niveaux dans la propriété intellectuelle. Il y a ce qu'on appelle le droit d'auteur et le droit de propriété. Dans le droit d'auteur, toute personne ayant participé à la recherche est réputée être auteur du travail. Mais ça ne veut pas dire que vous allez en jouir les bénéfices si jamais on l'exploite. Par exemple, quelqu'un qui est ingénieur, qui travaille, comme je l'ai fait pendant 12 ans avec Ericsson, eh bien, si vous êtes un employé d'Ericsson qui vous paye, vous allez avoir le droit d'auteur, pas le droit de propriété. Le droit de propriété appartient à Ericsson, qui va vendre. Ensuite, il peut vous donner un bonus parce que vous avez un brevet, mais à l'université, c'est différent. À l'université, le droit d'auteur se confond avec le droit de propriété. Et ce que ça fait, ce que ça crée comme ambiance, je raconte une anecdote, mais qui est une vraie histoire. Et il y avait une technologie qui est ce qu'on appelle le GSM, qui a été inventé en Amérique du Nord par Ericsson. Et Ericsson, dans sa technologie, dans son innovation, a utilisé, disons, des idées qu'elle a trouvées, mais qui n'étaient pas brevetées. Il n'y avait pas de propriété intellectuelle revendiquée dessus. La technologie fonctionne bien, succès commercial, beaucoup d'argent. Et Motorola, une firme américaine, qui, comme tout le monde le fait, qui espionne les technologies des autres, est allé voir la technologie d'Ericsson et découvre qu'un module utilisé par Ericsson dans son téléphone GSM est couvert par un brevet de Motorola. Et là, Motorola dit, ah non, j'ai découvert le poteau rose, je vais faire du fric avec ça. Et Motorola a poursuivi Ericsson parce qu'il dit que vous avez utilisé une partie de technologie qui est couverte par un brevet que j'ai. Alors ça s'est réglé hors cours. Ericsson a dû payer 300 millions de dollars à GSM. Et depuis ce moment-là, mes étudiants qui interviennent dans les projets avec Ericsson, eh ben, s'ils tous, on brevette. Et là, ça devient invivable pour l'ingénieur que je suis, parce que l'ingénieur en moi, c'est quelqu'un qui est ouvert à la discussion, les idées appartiennent à tout le monde, alors que dans ce milieu-là, eh ben, chacun revendique sa part. Et c'est un petit peu l'effet pervers de la propriété intellectuelle. Ça peut handicaper la recherche, dans le sens que ça contraint trop.
Ouais. Il y a toujours deux côtés à une médaille, comme on dit, donc, des bienfaits et certains effets néfastes. If I may come back to you, Mr. Lindor, because you are in the business world. You've been traveling, Bay Street here, around the world as well. Let's talk a little bit about sustainability of Black Canadian in the business ecosystem. I'd like to hear what are some of the ideas or observations you want to offer to us.
Amazing. Thank you for that question. That's a great question, Ms. Ma. So when it comes to sustainability, I think as far as entrepreneurship goes, entrepreneurship, I view it as a form of resilience. I think entrepreneurship is a vehicle that should be explored by people of African descent and definitely disinvested communities in Canada. And if we want to create real sustainability, I think intellectual property has to be part of the equation. And the proof is in the pudding. I'll give you a little anecdote since we talked about anecdote. We came up with Happily from a real personal experience. Now, I'll tell you this, and I'm not proud of this, but it's a true story. I actually started Happily because I had never started a company with money that was actually made for that purpose. I'll explain. A Falkman Institute in the US estimates that over 90% of entrepreneurs do not start or scale their business using funding that was made by government for that specific one. 90%. When it comes to Black and brown entrepreneurs and Indigenous, it's close to 98%, meaning they don't get a grant. They actually maximize their credit card, deplete their savings, puts a strain on the family, and they sometimes even they go bankrupt just to start the process of creating businesses. And I was one of them. I actually sold my house to start my last business. I lived in Bois in a pretty decent neighborhood in Montréal, and I sold my property. And I had a friend of mine who came up to me and said, "Did you move, Terry?" I was like, "Yeah, actually I did." He's like, "You don't live in Bois anymore? What? Why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, I started this business. I saw an opportunity and I sold my property." He said, "You did what?" I said, "I sold my property." He's like, "Why would you do that?" And this was a peer, like entrepreneur of European descent. And he said, "Terry, let me school you. You got to come to my house next week. I'm going to show you how we do it." He said that word for word, how we do it. I went there. His father is a huge executive on Bay Street, huge executive, an entrepreneur, like we call them. And he invited his golf buddies. And he invited his friends and families. And here we are in Westmount, beautiful property, millions of dollars. And over the span of 2 hours, he was able to have, in startup ecosystem, we call them love round or family round. You go from love round, family round when you have an idea, you're in ideation. You move to seed round when you start to have a product that might be interesting to the market. Then you go to Series A, Series B, and hopefully Series C and IPO. Long story short, in a span of 2 hours, he raises close to $1 million. And I'm like, can you adopt me, please? Like, who has been lying to me all this time that I need to like sacrifice my mental health, sacrifice who I am, get separated over this, fight with my ex, like all of these things that I'll spare you, that you're able to raise close to $1 million. And he was proud. He should be proud. He had the proper network to do it. And there are 4 key barriers to starting and scaling a great business in North America. Access to networks, access to mentors, access to capital, and the last one, which is the most important one, access to knowledge. You don't know what you don't know, which is the most important one. We saw it at Face. You can give all the capital in the world you want. If people don't have credit literacy, fiscal literacy, intellectual property literacy, you're not going to be sustainable in your business model. So he raises $1 million. 2 years into this, he's no longer in business. We are. So what we decided to do is we created a prototype and we ran it on ourselves. I said, let me try to see if we could actually code something and then hack life, right? So we created a prototype, beta version. We run it on ourselves. We land $250,000 of grants to start Happily. I'm like, wait a second. We're onto something here. It isn't working, right? So we then go to NextAI, we apply, we get in. We use our technology, again, we get in. We apply for another technology, our LLM, and lands it. We're like, whoa, it's getting fine-tuned, it's getting better, it's writing properly. We're uploading documents, it's reading them for us, the FAQs, the rules to apply. Next thing you know, we're like 44,000 clients in. We're generating a 7-figure, the business is worth 8-figure. And to me, this is true resilience. This is true demonstration of how you create sustainability. And I'll leave you with this. The last point I'll make is I think SIPO can play such a crucial role in creating sustainable Black wealth in Canada. And I'll tell you how. 3 years ago, the CMHC came out and admitted that they contributed to the destruction of Ogan's Alley and Africville. During the Highway Acts in the US, they ran highways in Canada as well. It is what it is, destroyed Black families and Black real estate. So that nobody could go in NDG or the West Side or Ogan's Alley, which is now worth a lot of money, and do a love round with their uncles and their golf playing melanated and African descent buddies. You can't do it today because the wealth was destroyed 60 years ago. Now, in the process of sustainability, I'm a real estate investor. I have tenants. They hate me, and I give them grace. I don't hate them, but I don't like them as much as I should. Now, here's what I would like to have instead of tenants. I would like to have patents, because that's the ultimate form of passive real estate income. I would love to see SIPO adopt the same position that the CMHC took. We might have done not so good in the past. We're going to do better right now. And the same way CMHC now has programs to help scale Black ownership of real estate properties for Black Canadians, because they've admitted they're wrong. What if SIPO became the CMHC for Black intellectual property? I'm just depositing this. Hopefully it's received properly. I'm encrypting this, decrypt it however you want. But I believe there's a strategic opportunity for being not on the right side of history here, but on the right side of humanity. And saying SIPO is going to become exactly what the CMHC could be for Black Canadian ownership, but on the intellectual side. I'll tell you what, we don't need more successful Black politicians in Canada. We need more successful Black researchers, doctors that are going to help me empower my community as a Black entrepreneur, creating job in a Canadian economic that needs it. Thank you.
And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to hear some of the initiatives that CIPO has in the next panel as well. Dr. Daniel, you created the Canadian Black Scientists Network. And congratulations on doing that, by the way. Can you tell us a bit more about that organization and the role it plays in Canada's innovation ecosystem, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So first off, I didn't create it. I co-founded it with 4 or 5 other Black scientists across Canada, Dr. Marianne Andrade at the University of Toronto, Dr. Kevin Hewitt at Dalhousie University, Dr. Lottie Majeska at McGill University, Dr. Eric Lecong at Saskatchewan, and Dr. Tamara Franz Odenthal at Mount St. Vincent on the East Coast. And we all knew each other from various conferences where we bumped into each other, and we typically found each other because, again, we were typically the only 2 or 3 Black scientists at a conference with 1,000 or more other scientists. And so we would bump into each other and we'd be like, you know, where are our trainees? Where are our people? And so we always joked about forming a network, but we were all too busy because we were also the lonely onlys at our individual institutions. And we just were called upon for a lot of community and committee service at our universities. But then the murder of George Floyd happened, and Tamara, who's actually a white South African at Mount St. Vincent, she knew all of us from different scenarios. And she literally emailed all of us and said, "You've all told me individually you want to form a network. I'm going to help you. You need to do it now." And she literally was the one that triggered this because we were like exhausted like everyone else by the murder of George Floyd. And so that's when we started it and how we started it, recognizing that many of our Black scientists and engineers in Canada were not being acknowledged or promoted. And it was an opportunity to bring them together. And also for many of us, we had Black trainees in our labs who were choosing not to stay in academia, who were choosing not to become professors or engineers because they saw the challenges we had as their supervisors, the discrimination we were facing, and they did not want to go through that. They were already into the work-life balance thing at their young ages. And so we felt it was an opportunity to bring together as many Black Canadian scientists as we could find and as many Black trainees at all universities across Canada so that they could be inspired to pursue careers in academia, engineering, just in STEM in general. And it's been a labor of love. We're all doing this off the sides of our desk as Black professionals and Black scientists. And our biggest challenge, which I think I mentioned a few days ago, is we are not for profit. But the issue for us is having access to funds because many federal funding opportunities require that you're not for profit or a charitable organization. But we were co-founded by Black professors. We don't have the time or the money to hire a lawyer to actually complete the documents and register us as a not-for-profit. So that is, even though it's simple, it's a huge barrier. One person said to me, a non-melanated person said to me, "Well, why don't you guys all cobble your money together?" And again, there's this assumption that because we're professors, we have a lot of money, and we don't. We don't have intergenerational wealth. Many of us, we are the first in our families to be professors, and we don't get paid that much as professors, by the way, just letting people know. But we do this because we love research. And so that is a huge, huge barrier right now for us as the Canadian Black Scientists Network. We held our first 2 conferences virtually online. And we were able to secure funding from our tri-council agencies, NSERC and CIHR, and the National Research Council, as well as from several universities across Canada. We did that in 2021 and 23. This year, we're trying to have our first in-person conference here in Ottawa. And to date, don't say nice, and to date, all of the letters we've sent to various presidents have come back saying, "We have other priorities this year. We cannot support you." Yes. And there's funding out there from the federal government we cannot access because we don't have that charitable status, and we literally have no time because I'm writing 2 grants that are due in the next 2 weeks. I don't have time. No one else has time. And so we're actually incredibly frustrated. We're praying we don't have to cancel the conference this year because we were really hoping to have it in person for many of our trainees, to meet the people, like one of our CBSM members is here, like to meet others in person and to find opportunities for jobs, as well as opportunities for postdoctoral fellowships, network with professors as well, learn about how to become a professor, how to apply for faculty positions. And so we're, so anyone here, this is a pitch, a plea, anyone here who can help us with the $150,000 we need or more to launch this first in-person version of the conference, we will be more than happy to work with you. And if you can help us get our not-for-profit or charitable status, even better, because we're willing to write the grants. We just, it's time. Time is money, and we have no time and no money. So.
Well, Queen, if I may, you don't have time, but we do. Our AI does have time. So it'll write it for y'all. Let us know.
Okay.
This is one purpose of such event that's being put, is to bring together so many talented individuals and powerful one in the brain. So there's a network shortly after too. Let me come to a bit more personal element as well. But before I get to that, Dr. Pierre, I was once told that talented individuals can do what others can't, but genius individuals can't. They can see what others can't. What is it that you currently see in terms of ideas or innovations that you may want to share with us a little bit without disclosing your IP?
La question même de l'innovation, c'est une question très difficile à cerner. Je me rends compte avec mes étudiants, surtout quand elles viennent, il y a des femmes et des hommes là, mais les deux le font. Ils viennent me voir à mon bureau. Ah, Monsieur Pierre, j'ai une idée. Et tout de suite après, ces personnes-là enchaînent en disant, j'ai la solution. Alors, je leur rappelle rapidement à l'ordre en leur disant, mais l'idée, ce n'est pas un problème de recherche. L'idée doit t'amener à un problème. Donc, le problème, quand tu veux le résoudre, tu vas faire de la recherche. Et quand tu vas faire de la recherche, tu vas trouver la solution. Donc, ça, c'est la démarche intellectuelle, mais qui n'est pas une démarche intuitive. Autrement dit, ce n'est pas quelque chose qui vient de la naissance, là. Ça s'apprend. C'est un processus. Et avoir des idées, on peut toujours les stimuler, mais ça prend une attitude mentale. Il faut que tu aies un esprit un peu frondeur, et, comme je l'ai dit au début, qui n'aime pas marcher sur les sentiers battus, et qui aime explorer. Et c'est avec ça que tu vas trouver les idées. Et ce que je peux vous dire, mes meilleures idées viennent le matin, quand je prends ma douche. Quand je suis sous ma douche. C'est là que les idées arrivent. Et un autre moment où les idées m'arrivent aussi, c'est au moment d'aller au lit. Alors, je dois vous dire que je ne dors pas beaucoup. Et en attendant que le sommeil arrive, il y a plein d'idées qui arrivent dans la tête. Et il m'arrive souvent de me réveiller pour aller les écrire, parce que je ne suis pas sûr que demain, je vais me rappeler. À partir du moment où tu as les idées, les choses vont arriver d'elles-mêmes. Alors je vois ma collègue, Dr Daniel, prendre des notes. Et je n'ai pas amené mon carnet aujourd'hui, mais j'ai toujours un petit carnet pour noter les bonnes idées. Parce que les bonnes idées, quand elles arrivent, on ne sait pas par quel processus, il faut les capter. Et ce qui fait avancer la recherche scientifique, ce qui fait avancer l'innovation, ce qui fait avancer les entreprises, c'est notre capacité de générer de nouvelles idées. Et une fois que vous avez les nouvelles idées, le reste va venir. Hein. Moi, j'ai vu des personnes qui n'avaient pas de sous du tout. Ben, rien qu'avec les idées, ils ont pu lever des montants énormes J'ai un collègue qui travaillait avec moi, on était à Ericsson ensemble. Lui, moi j'étais chercheur à Polytechnique, lui il était mon correspondant, on travaillait sur des projets d'Ericsson. Il a eu une brillante idée, il est allé chercher 200 millions de dollars et pour développer l'idée. Pendant 12 ans, il n'y avait rien qui sortait. Hein. On essayait de réaliser l'idée avec 200 millions de dollars. Donc, j'en connais beaucoup comme ça. Donc, les idées, il faut les avoir. Alors, c'est ce que je dis à mes étudiants. Les idées, c'est comme un bouquet de fleurs. On prend du temps pour arranger le bouquet de fleurs. On le fait avec art. Une fois que vous avez le beau bouquet, maintenant, ça va vous prendre un beau marketeur qui va vendre le bouquet. Parce que si vous avez le beau bouquet, vous n'avez pas le bon marketeur, la personne qui va vendre, qui n'est pas un bon vendeur, vous allez avoir un mauvais prix pour votre bouquet. Donc, c'est un mélange des deux. Avoir un corpus d'idées assez convaincantes pour que les gens, ce qu'ils regardent, disent « Wow !» Et une fois que la personne dit « Wow !» ben là, maintenant, il y a le marketeur qui va dire « Combien tu es prêt à mettre là pour réaliser l'idée ?» Alors, dans un de mes cours aux études supérieures, c'est ce que je fais, je développe la capacité des étudiants à innover. Je leur dis « Imaginez une situation, un problème qui nécessite une solution. C'est dans le domaine des réseaux mobiles et une solution de mobilité. Alors, ce que vous allez proposer, je ne me soucie pas de savoir s'il est faisable techniquement ou non. Parce qu'en général, les bonnes idées, on ne sait pas a priori si elles sont faisables techniquement ou non. Ce qui est l'important, c'est la pertinence de la chose. Est-ce que tu peux convaincre quelqu'un que si tu résous ce problème-là, peu importe la méthode technologique que vous utilisez pour le résoudre, est-ce que ça va lui rendre heureux? Si oui, ben, allons estimer combien de personnes on peut rendre heureux. Si vous me dites qu'il y a 20 millions de personnes qui seront heureuses par cette technologie-là, ben là, il y a un marché. Et là, maintenant, on peut aller chercher les financiers qui vont dire « Ah, mais oui, il y a 20 millions qui sont prêts à acheter ça, ben moi, je vais injecter de l'argent. » Alors, et je leur dis, pour me convaincre, je vais pouvoir me dire assez pour aller convaincre mon épouse de vendre notre maison pour investir dans votre entreprise.
Absolument. Et en fait, je regarde le temps passer, malheureusement. We have about another 10 minutes. I want to ask Monsieur Lindor a question, and I'm going to ask each one of you one last question before we close in the next 10 minutes. During our conversation earlier this week, as we were preparing for the panel, Monsieur Lindor, you said something that I took note, that your success came at a high personal cost as a Black entrepreneur. If you don't mind sharing with us what you can, what did you mean by that?
I think any disinvested communities or underrepresented group could relate to this. I think when you try it, people ask me, what is innovation? I say, to me, innovation is unlocking human potential. So when I hear innovators like Dr. Pierre, I think they have the ability to switch it on or off. They could unlock human potential just like that. When I hear SIPO has made the intentional decision to innovate, that means you're unlocking human potential. And that makes people feel seen. When you unlock my potential and you look me in my eyes and you say, we're going to help you get there. What you're essentially saying is, I believe in the promise of what you represent. I see you. I see your color. I see what you bring. I'm not going to be colorblind. I actually recognize what you bring, and I think it's beautiful. And there's power in feeling seen. And not just as an entrepreneur. I think intrapreneurs as well. I think Mesma, Ketland, Stevens have tremendous IP, tremendous intellectual property that they bring to the table. And when you validate that by saying, we're going to do this event, we're going to empower you to do an event like this, what you're saying is we're seeing you. And I could speak for myself. When we feel seen as underrepresented folks, it's as if the world stares at us. Because as much as we fight, racism is a 24-hour problem, we only have a finite time to fight it at the expense of our mental health. So for me, mental health has been a tremendous challenge. Black entrepreneurship is a lonely roadmap. I see Sanel and his wife there. They could speak on this for a long, long time as I can. And then how do we equip ourselves with this beautiful ecosystem by creating most barriers? Nothing better than intellectual property. So I, for one, know for a fact that if I do feel seen, I do feel recognized, it's good. And the analogy I'll deposit is, I say this all the time, everywhere around the world. If you think that humans are racist, wait till you see AI. Oh yeah. You want to see real bias? Algorithmic bias are real. When you get to fine tuning and you have a bunch of video gamers that, you know, are in their basement of their parents fine tuning of a model, you're going to see some real biases come out. And you know who loses? Women. You know who loses? Indigenous people. So we have to also recognize that women have the solution for women. Black people have the solution for Black people. It makes sense. When the Franco-Canadians said, we're told to speak white, I'm a big fan of history. And they said, no, we're not taking this anymore. They had the solution for Franco-Canadians. And look at what happened, right? I think when everybody feels seen, feels recognized, gets justice, great things can happen for our society. And nobody has to expense and be dehumanized like we saw in Hollywood. It's not that AI will take your job, but if it doesn't take your job, it's going to dehumanize and devalue your job. So now you're no longer going to be a writer in Hollywood. You're going to be an AI editor. And we're just going to pay you a little bit less. What does that mean as a human being, right? So I think when we take the time, and I meant what I said, I would rather have all the patents of Dr. Pierre than all the tenants I got. Because that income is not just better on his side, it's great income. You deserved it. Nobody gentrified your idea. You feel seen by the world. It is the ultimate rental income. And the real estate play has sailed. It's gone. It's not coming back. So yeah, I think that for me on a personal level, I think that when you give us the tools and the means, especially the entrepreneurs that are moving the needle forward, that look like us, it's comforting to see that your department is doing everything it can to empower Black voices within government. It makes me feel seen because I'm here today. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. Not that you don't see me, but I know they saw me first, which allows me to see you and which makes me feel like the world is listening. Thank you for this.
Thank you. And my last question for you as panelists today, I'll put you in a scenario. The gentleman who was next to me not too far is Deputy Minister Kennedy, who addressed us. He is a very busy individual, but very powerful and influential. So he's done a lot advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion in the department and the federal government as well. Suppose he had a magic wand and he could grant you, as a Black leaders and leaders of our community, a wish that you can ask on behalf of Black entrepreneurs and innovators. What do you ask for? Let me start with you, Dr. Daniel.
Thinking. Or I could. So I asked a friend, and they said unlimited funds for Black communities without having to write grants. Right? Definitely easy. Actually, not easy. Someone that is dedicated to just writing or applications for not-for-profit and charitable status, because that is a huge deterrent to many grassroots organizations, not just Black communities, but I think every other underrepresented community struggles with this, and we shouldn't have to struggle. And I guess, as Thierry said, this is one way of disinvesting communities from Canada. And Canada has two sources, or I should say two resources, that we should be capitalizing on to boost our economy. And we can see that now more than ever. And that's our natural resources, which we're really good at, but we are not tapping into our human resources. By disenfranchising a significant proportion of our population, we are limiting our potential to actually be the amazing country that we can be. And those of us that grew up in low-income communities or from, we're not born in Canada, we know that necessity is the mother of invention. And many of us are creative because we had to be creative. I grew up learning how to make a scooter out of pots and pans and tins. We know how to be creative. Again, we need opportunity, access, because we do have a lot of creativity built into us. We just don't have the opportunity to do it. So if those barriers are removed completely, it wouldn't be just for Black communities. I think it would be for every Canadian who really wants Canada to be this place where we value ourselves and our country, and so we can stand up and say we're better than those south of the border. So
Thank you very much. May I go to you, Mr. Lindor, and then we'll close with Dr. Pierre.
Yeah, I grew up in Hochelaga Maisonneuve, became a man in Saint Michel in Montreal North, and in Hochelaga Maisonneuve, all my friends were white. Patrick Sorel, shout out to him. I don't know where you are, but I love you, bro. And Patrick Sorel was struggling just like me. Poor white guy. Well, I'm poor Black, he's poor white. But here's what. It's not that white people don't face oppression. It's that they don't face it because of the color of their skin. And that's a conversation I've had with Patrick's father when I was younger. Because he was in the same trouble. Hochelaga Maisonneuve in the 80s, 90s was where dreams went to die. Legit in Montreal. So once we recognize that the Black experience in Canada is very unique based on this, we don't get to take out our pins. I see the beautiful flag on people, like you wear it 9 to 5 and then you take it out. My skin is 24/7 and I'm proud of it. It's my superpower. I think that as Black Canadians, just recognizing that we face a certain kind of predicament would be the number one thing. And then putting in place systems. I don't care for an individual racist personally that calls me the N-word to my face. I actually respect it. I stay away from them, right? But it's the systems for me. We just had a beautiful Black queen in Toronto land a procurement for $2 million, true story, on our platform. She lands a $2 million procurement to provide utensils for the government of Ontario in a specific program. They're asking her to cough up the bill for 60 days. She can't do it. So she loses the procurement. So what systems can we put in place to make sure that doesn't happen? So she made it all the way to the end. But then they're saying, okay, we're going to pay you in 60 days. And I was just at the Wharton School of Business in U of Penn, and Mike Mills, Chief Procurement Officer, said, Terry, that's such a good identified problem, we have to fix it. When we allocate, and they allocate $3 billion a year, U of Penn. When we allocate procurements, how about we develop a system to make sure that disinvested communities can fulfill the procurements? Because B2B is nice, B2C is nice, but B2G is where you create real wealth, okay? So I would say my ask would be to have a designated bureau, same way with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, that recognizes the experience of Black Canadians and people of African descent as completely distinct and provide them with the means and resources to help Black Canadians be active citizens and contributors to the Canadian society. And it starts with economics. Marching in the street doesn't interest me as much as creating jobs and opportunities. So that would be my ask. And last thing, we're talking about ownership and property. We are on unceded territories. What does it really mean to talk about ownership on stolen land? That's also something we should think about. Nobody's illegal on stolen land. Nobody can own property technically on stolen land. What does it mean really? So I think that's a non-comfortable conversation we should all be able to have. And I'm glad to say that it looks like I'm preaching to the choir here because everybody looks like they're really inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Last thoughts from vous, Dr. Pierre, concernant qu'est-ce que vous aimeriez voir, qu'est-ce que vous demanderiez pour améliorer les conditions des innovateurs et des entrepreneurs noirs?
Là, je prends mon chapeau d'entrepreneur. J'ai créé des entreprises, dont une en particulier en 2007, c'est la première entreprise formée par des ingénieurs noirs au Québec, qui s'appelle Géninov, qui existe depuis 2007 et qui aujourd'hui emploie une 60aine de personnes au Québec et ailleurs. Et en tant que président, j'ai observé l'évolution. La plus grande innovation qui aurait pu être faite, je sais que ça se fait de manière timide, mais je reviendrai sur les limites de ce qui est fait. La plus grande innovation, ce serait de donner un accès, je dirais, réservé aux firmes, aux nouvelles firmes créées par les entrepreneurs noirs. Parce que vous avez parlé de barrières systémiques, il y en a des barrières systémiques. Pour obtenir un contrat, surtout dans un domaine comme l'ingénierie, on va vous demander d'avoir un portfolio qui fait état de votre expérience, combien de contrats vous avez déjà trouvés, quel est le montant de ces contrats, depuis combien d'années que vous existez. Mais si vous démarrez une entreprise, vous n'avez rien de cela. Ça veut dire que vous allez être pris dans un cercle vicieux où on vous demande pour rentrer, il faut avoir les pieds à l'intérieur. Si vous avez les pieds à l'intérieur, vous n'avez pas besoin de rentrer. Vous êtes déjà à l'intérieur. C'est ça. Donc, c'est comment faire pour sortir de ce cercle vicieux-là. Alors, le gouvernement fédéral a commencé à le faire, mais de manière trop timide. Ce serait de réserver, peut-être à une grandeur d'échelle budgétaire, par exemple, tout ce qui est en dessous de 200 000 ou 300 000 $, d'accorder ça en réduisant un peu les critères. De manière, par exemple, le critère qui dit vous devez avoir 3 ans pour appliquer sur un truc fédéral, là, il faudrait faire partir ça. Parce que c'est pas parce qu'on a 0 année d'expérience qu'on n'en a pas. Parce que oui, en tant que firme, je peux ne pas avoir une historique de réalisation, mais en tant que personne, j'en ai. Or, en général, on n'admet pas l'expérience de la personne, c'est l'expérience institutionnelle qui compte. Donc ça, c'est une première chose. La deuxième chose, ce serait comme l'équivalent d'observatoire. C'est bien de prendre des mesures, mais est-ce qu'on les applique? Est-ce qu'on les applique bien? Quand j'étais plus jeune, très militant, j'étais président d'un comité qui s'appelait comité aviseur de la ville de Montréal sur les relations interculturelles. Le maire siégeait sur le comité. Le maire avait toute la bonne foi du monde pour essayer de régler un problème de déséquilibre en matière d'emploi à la ville. C'est que les Noirs en particulier doivent être à peu près de 8 à 10% dans la ville de Montréal, alors qu'ils sont embauchés à peu près à hauteur de 2 à 3%. Donc, il y avait un déséquilibre. Alors, il a voulu régler ça. Il a confié le mandat au comité. On a mis en place des mesures, en particulier pour l'embauche des personnes d'origine noire. Ce que les fonctionnaires ont fait, il y avait des emplois d'été. On prenait la mesure au mois de mai. C'est là qu'on observait est-ce qu'il y a eu progrès. En avril, ils embauchent massivement des Noirs sur des emplois d'été qui vont durer 4 mois. En mai, fin mai, on prend la photo, on dit voilà, il y a telle quantité de Noirs qui sont rentrés, mais on sait qu'ils vont sortir 3 mois plus tard. Ça améliore les statistiques sur la courte durée. Alors, si on avait un véritable observatoire qui observe la chose et qui analyse les données, qui les ventile, qui va voir combien de temps ces personnes sont restées, combien qu'on a pu garder dans des emplois permanents, etc., ça ne se passerait pas comme ça. Donc, autrement dit, ce n'est pas tout de prendre des mesures, il faut en faire le suivi. Est-ce que ça a donné les résultats escomptés? Maintenant, pour terminer sur un mot juste, parce que je connais bien le débat sur l'EDI. L'EDI, c'est une mesure de justice, une mesure de justice sociale. Et je disais au début que l'intelligence est la chose la mieux partagée au monde. L'intelligence n'a pas de couleur. Alors, si l'intelligence n'a pas de couleur, pourquoi on aurait 20% de noirs dans une société, il y a seulement 5% qui accèdent aux emplois de valeur? Pourquoi? Pourquoi ça devrait être comme ça? Ça veut dire qu'il y a un biais en quelque part, un biais systémique. Il y en a qui refusent de le reconnaître. Or, l'EDI vient le reconnaître. Maintenant, c'est quels sont les mécanismes efficaces de contrôle que l'on peut mettre en place. Ça, ce serait mon vœu le plus cher. De travailler à mettre en place de vrais systèmes de contrôle.
Merci beaucoup à vous trois. Thank you very much to distinguished panelists. I've heard about determination, social justice, innovation. I've heard about strength, la force que vous avez pour arriver où vous êtes. Love, l'amour de ce que vous êtes, les gens avec qui vous partagez. And la fierté, proud. I am proud to be here with you today You are giants. And I want to thank you on behalf of everyone here online, and thank you for what you've been doing for Canada. There's no words. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that concludes our first panel of the afternoon. Thank you so much, Ms. Mann, for moderating that panel, and thank you to all our panelists for joining us. Thank you as well to the 250 participants who are joining us online. It's quite an amazing feat. To echo Ms. May, I heard a lot. I took a lot of notes, but notably that our success and our Black excellence is linked to a lot of our struggles and loss, but it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be that way, and that comes from access to information and funding, and that's hopefully what the next topic in the following panel will be about. Before that, we have a 15-minute break at this time, so please feel free to stretch your legs, grab some refreshments, and use the washrooms outside. Thank you very much. See you in 15.
Merci d'avoir visionné la vidéo. Nous espérons que cette discussion sur la propriété intellectuelle vous a été utile. Si vous êtes un entrepreneur noir et que vous souhaitez approfondir vos connaissances sur l'API, consultez notre page sur les entrepreneurs noirs et la propriété intellectuelle. Vous y trouverez de l'information sur des programmes de financement, des histoires de réussite et d'autres informations pour vous inspirer et lancer votre parcours de pays. Vous pouvez également réserver un appel individuel gratuit avec un conseiller en propriété intellectuelle dans votre région pour voir comment l'API peut soutenir l'expansion de votre entreprise. Vous trouverez les liens dans la boîte de description ci-dessous.